What's up, y'all? What's good? Welcome to the What Up Doe Show. It's your boy Dame D, and I am back with another one. I'm gonna wait for a few people to jump in before I start the title of the show, or before I start talking about the conversation. Well, I'll just go ahead with the title of the show. Well, you guys see the title of the show. Are you the love of your significant other's life, or did they just settle for you? That's going to be the title of the show. I just actually did a show on that over on Zoom. It was a pretty good show, great show. I just want to come over here and just talk about it with you guys for a little bit. Want to go live on that and see who all was up, see who was up. And want to join in on the conversation. So I'll wait for a few people to come in to chime in, and then I'll go ahead with the conversation. Check my volume to make sure that I can be heard. Okay, testing, testing. Okay, testing, testing. All right, I can be heard. So, if you are not subscribed to the show, I need for you to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Definitely make sure you hit that subscribe button. But like I said, you see the title in the show. I need for you, as you guys come in, let me know that what city, what state you're checking in from, and then I'll go in and start up the conversation. So yeah, are you the love of your significant other's life, or were you just, or they just settled for you? That was the conversation that we had earlier. We had a pretty good show. We had a panel of people on that we were discussing that conversation and that topic about. It was a pretty good conversation. So I just want to come live and see what you guys were, what you guys' opinion was about that topic, about that subject. Pretty good subject to have, and it's pretty good conversation to have with your peoples, with your significant other. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people don't want to talk about. A lot of people don't want to go down that road, or or that subject is a little bit too touchy, or a lot of people just won't talk about that or ask that question. But over here on the What Up Though show, we ask those type of questions. So, are you the love of your significant other's life, or did they just settle for you? So put that in the chat. I definitely want you guys to interact with me. I'm not going to be on here too long. I'm getting ready to lay it down in a little bit. I just want to come on and just talk about that for a second. I just did a live show over on Zoom talking about that specific topic. So are you the love of your significant other life, or did they just settle for you? So it was a good conversation we had. We chopped it up for a good hour. Asked a pretty it was pretty good questions that we talked about. Everybody's pretty much came up with the same. Well, I'm not going to say with the same opinion, but we pretty much summed it up to you got to love who loves you. Sometimes you can't go for, and we talked about this. Most men, we want to go for that knockout, that bombshell. And most women want that tall, dark, and handsome man. But sometimes you can't have what you want. You have to settle for, you know um sometimes I'm not going to say the second best, but you have to settle for, who loves you, and at the end of the day, that's what it's about, and that's not, and that's not a bad thing. And when we, as I talked about it on the show, settling for second best, and I won't even say settling, but just basically, and then, like I said, we had a few people on that talked about that, and a friend of mine, LaShawn, she even said it is not settling. It actually, the second choice is pretty much your first choice. You know what I mean? And like I said, it was a good conversation. It was a good show. I just want to see who was up over here, who want to check in and chime in about and talk about that for a second. Because those are questions that most people don't talk about. Or even ask your significant other or your partner. Like, was I your first choice, or did you have other preferences or whatnot? Because most women, um, like I said, they want the tall, dark, and handsome. But at the end of the day, most women will settle, for a man that um most women will settle with a man for security. You know what I mean? A man that that can give them comfort. That can take care of them, and they don't have to worry about too much of nothing. So women, they settle for security more than looks. At the end of the day. So I need for you guys to chime in and give me your opinion on what you think. What women and men versus settling for versus being our first options. So give me your opinion on what you think the conversation. Well, I'm not going to say the conversation, but just give me you guys' opinion on what you think about the topic in the conversation, or where you may fit in. With your significant other. Yep. So it was a good show. A lot of a lot of people had different opinions. But at the end of the day, um, most of us agree with you have to love who loves you. Like I said, mostly everybody agree with, yeah, who don't want you know um a beautiful woman, knock dead gorgeous. Who doesn't want that? You know what I mean? But sometimes you can't get what you want. Because, not even that, but sometimes the beautiful women, or the men or the men that women may think that's nice looking or whatever, those be the ones that give you the headache and the heartaches. Those are the ones that that'll put you through the ringers or through the riffraff, I should say. So give me your opinion. I need for you guys to comment. Let me know what you think about that subject. Let me know, do you think you were the first choice or the second choice? Because pretty much that's just what the topic was about. Do you think you were the first choice, or do you think that your partner just settled for you, out of security, and what you had to offer? Because that's what most women will settle for. They'll settle for a man who has his things together, who offers, who brings things to the table, I should say. Good job, own house, car, you know what I mean, versus settling for, a motherfucker who may be nice looking or good looking, but don't have shit, who's leeching off of her or whatnot. You know what I mean? So leave your opinion. I want to know what you guys think about that situation. Have you had that conversation with your significant other? Because like I said, these are conversations that most people shy away from. Most people don't have these conversations or even ask, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like I said, most men, at the end of the day, yes, we would prefer that drop dead gorgeous woman, but at the end of the day, that comes with a lot of shit at the end of the day. You know, um, it comes with a lot of grooming, I should say. You're gonna have to make sure all her necessities, you know what I mean, are taken care of and things like that. So, just going through, going after looks, sometimes it never works out at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, looks can only go so far, and you can't keep them looks forever. So you have to go with what makes you happy. You have to actually sometimes go with, like I said, with most women will go with security, knowing that, they don't have to worry about struggling or going through some bullshit with a motherfucker who ain't got shit. So it was just a good conversation. Like I said, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. Let me know where you're checking in from. It is 2:50 Eastern time over here, where I am checking in from. I see what up though, Vito? Okay, it depends on what. Tell me what it depends on. All right, were you the first choice, or did she settle? Did you bring things to the table that maybe the drop dead gorgeous guy didn't have? You know what I mean? So you got to ask yourself that question too. Because a lot of us guys, we don't keep it real with ourselves. Most, I mean, women, and women won't keep it real with you neither. They'll tell you that you probably was the first choice, but at the end of the day, they're going to go with, who can give them that security blanket, who can basically it's mostly the men who settle. Now tell me why you say that. Oh, yeah, tell me why you say that because I think it's mostly the women who settle. You know what I mean? Men, I mean, men, well, sometimes we can kind of control our destinies, or kind of control who we can date, depending on your situation. You know what I mean? Depending on your money too. That has a lot to do with it too, Vito. So, but yeah, tell me why you think it's mostly men. Because at the end of the day, I'll say I think it's mostly women. Because at the end of the day, we all want something that looks good. At the end of the day, but most women will and pretty much during the show, that's what the women pretty much agreed to. That some of the women said that they're going to make sure that that they're secure in the relationship. Over looks, I should say. So yeah, tell me, Vito, why do you think most men would settle, especially if it's a man with substantial, that's secure and has money and that has everything going on. Why would he have to settle? Is the question that I'm asking you. Now a man who's now on the other end, a man who doesn't have shit, and don't have anything going on for himself, yes, he will settle, but a man who has means, and has everything going on for himself, he normally he doesn't settle. Normally he'll get that 10. And it'll be the woman who will settle for that man who has everything going on for herself, who may not be a 10 himself. You know what I mean? But we all agreed at the end of the day, it's really not about, you know, um, it's not about the first choice, because at the end of the day, your first choice will be your second choice will be your first choice. And what I mean by that is, we had one of my my co-hosts who was on the show tonight. She actually said that it's not about first or second choice, because your second choice is actually will be your first choice. You know what I mean? Because you're going to choose women will choose them over security and making sure that their future is financially set over a man who looks good. And most men will try to go after the women who looks good to them versus a woman who can actually bring something to the table, I should say. But I just want to check in and chime in. But yeah, Vito, tell me that. Tell me why you think most men settle. Vito Andalonio. Andaloni. Yep. So where you checking in from, Vito? Make sure y'all hit that subscribe button. Make sure y'all like, comment, and share. Vito also said you can get married to a 10 and 10 years later. She said, well, yeah, I agree with you. Like I said, that's why you can't always go on looks, because one thing about looks will fade. You know what I mean? That's why you got to go on trust, love, and who really loves you at the end of the day. You know what I mean? And that's at the end of the day, that's what, we all kind of agreed on that. Looks, like you said, Vito, looks can and will fade. So you can't always go on that. You got to go on who's loyal to you, who's been treating, who makes you feel good, and who you love. So it was just a good conversation we had. We had fun over there discussing that. We laughed about the whole situation. Because at the end of the day, you know, um, it was just a good conversation. And it was a serious conversation, because these are questions that, a lot of people don't ask, or, we don't have these type of conversations. And if this is the veto, I think it is, man. You're gonna have to come on the show and chop it up with your boy. So what you mean? So you're settling? I'm trying to understand what you meant by that. So you're settling. And like I said, most men's with means and money normally don't have to settle. They'll go out there and get that 10 that they were looking for. It's probably the men without the means that'll settle. And we had, like I said during the show, we had a conversation about that. Most men will who doesn't have. I'm not going to say anything going on for themselves, but most men um who don't have that many options will settle. Put it that way. Okay, Vito said, "What do you mean by men with money?" Men with money. Most men with money doesn't have to settle for for anything. Most men with money doesn't have to settle. They don't have to go for second or third choices. They'll go after their first option, and normally, that's what they'll end up with. What they'll end up with. What do you said? How much money though? I'll just say six figures or more. Most women will settle for a man who makes six figures or more. Anything under that, she'll have options. Put it that way. Yeah, but like I said, it's definitely a good conversation to have. To even laugh and joke with your significant other. Like, you can hit. Okay, Vito also made another comment. He said they always have options. I mean, yeah, that's true. So my question to you is, do you think that you were the first option, or your significant other or partner settled for you? And that was just a question in the topic that we in the discussion that we were having over there. You know what I mean? And we talked about it. We didn't necessarily bring the money part in on the conversation. How much money a man or a woman had. We were just saying in general. Do you think that you were the first option? That your man or woman had, or they just settled for you. It didn't work out with the first option, so they just settled. More of that than the money situation. But we did discuss that. Because a man with means or money, he doesn't have to settle. And that's a fact. Everyone settles in that case. Like far as what? Like far as what, a man who doesn't have the necessary or the means. See, but you know what? I'm going to say no, because we actually talked about that in the situation. You may have the men that may, be attractive to women that may be broke. They don't have to settle. They'll get chose. So it can go either way. I understand what you're trying to say, Vito. Yeah, but like I said, it was just a good conversation and a good topic, And this was a conversation and a topic that stemmed from earlier today at work, and a lot of conversations that I have, like far as when I do shows like that, or just shows on that particular topic, stems from just conversations that I may have had prior earlier. Vito also made another comment. It's rare everyone. Hold on, it's rare everyone is with the person they wanted. I agree. I agree. But it still comes a point where um Whereas, yeah, more than likely, no one is going to be with the original person that they wanted to be with, But we were just talking about like fire as that second option. Were you that first person option or that second option, or they just settled for you at that time? But no, I agree with you 100%, Vito. Am I with my first love? No, my first love is when I was shit in a teenager. So I understand what you're saying, that no one see, and I don't think I think you made I don't think I put it in that tense, like first love, like when you like your first love type situation shit. We're pretty much we're talking like when we were grown. Okay, Vito said then we all settle. In that case, if you looking at it in that case, yes, we all do settle in that case. But we were just talking about, like once you become an adult and you know what you want and you go after, you know what I mean? That first love or shit like that is what I mean. Okay, just for example, like the woman that you may be with now, we can use that as an example. So, do you think, and that goes both ways? Do you think you were her first option? And that's a conversation you may be able to have with her. And that's all. And that's pretty much what I meant by that. Because I agree with you, Vito. No one is with the first person that the love of the first love of their life. Put it that way. You do have some that is. So you do have people in this world that is what the first person that they fell in love with, that is. You know what I mean? But I definitely agree with you. No one is probably with the first person that, they called their so-called love, I should say. Okay, you be easy, bro. You have a good night. Yeah, but like I said, I just want to check in and chime in and talk about that situation. I want to thank everybody who had came on the show early. It was a good conversation. It was a good show. We had fun. We laughed. We joked about it. Those are conversations and things that we do over here at the What Up Though Show. You know, um, and I try to bring content to you guys almost each and every day. I try to keep just keep fresh content coming. Just keep current good conversations and good topics coming. I want to thank Vito for his comments. It definitely is always a good interaction when people is leaving conversations and I mean leaving their comments. I love that. Okay, my bad. I thought you was out. Yeah, but yeah, I definitely love when people leave their comments. I want to thank Vito for his comments. And Vito, and that's pretty much that's what I meant. And I agree with you. No one normally is with the first person that they fell in love with. We were kind of talking about, the person that we're with, not the current person that you're with. Do you think that he or she, were your first option or you were the second option? You know what I mean? Yeah, but Vito, if you are who I think you are, what you think them Lions gonna do this year, man? We getting close to preseason, actually getting ready to start up next month, if I'm not mistaken. How you think them Lions gonna do? And then my question, if once you answer that, how you think they're gonna do is, do you think they'll be able to get back to the position that they were last year? Or go even further. What I mean further is to the Super Bowl. Because like I said, we were one game away, I believe, last year from the Super Bowl. Do you think that we got the key pieces this year to be able to contend? Because what killed us last year was the injuries. At the end of the year. But injuries happen. It's in the game. So I'm not making any excuses. We had a great season, but my question to you is, do you think we'll be able to leave off where we finished last year? Do you think we have a good season? We looking shaky on our interior line. Yeah. So did we draft or did we get anybody to replace him? I didn't even know he retired. Wow, that's a big loss. So I'm quite sure if he retired, we went out and drafted, a lineman to replace him. But that definitely, he's definitely going to be hard to replace. But yeah. So what do you think about the? What do you think? Do you think we're going to finish better or worse than what we finished last year? And then, and my first question is, who did we get to replace um, Ragnu? Who did we sign? You say he was a holdout. And then my question too is a lot of I wonder how are the injuries. Well, what's his name? Who broke his leg? I forget his name, but that came out of Michigan. Is Will he be ready to go at the beginning of the season? He said better in the playoffs, worse regular season. Okay. Oh, old boy out of Michigan. I cannot think of his name right now, but is he going to be ready to go at the beginning of the season? Our defensive end that broke his leg last year. Okay, Tate Rutledge. I'm gonna have to look him up. So do you think he'll be able to perform like Ragnu did? Or do you think he'll be able to hold that position down just as good? Because I know he's not going to be able to replace him right away and bring the skills that he had. Aiden Hutchinson, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Will he be ready at the beginning of the season? Because that's going to tell a lot. Okay, he ready. Hey, what do you think about them releasing? And I know that they only signed him because Aiden was out, but I think we should have kept old boy. The defensive end that we brought in from Cleveland. I forget his name, but wow. I thought he brought a lot of excitement to the team. He had the players out there hype, and I thought that that we should have kept him. Because like as we see, injuries are going to happen. You need backup. You need key backup players to be able to keep your squad going, and that's what we missed last year. He's a rookie. Ask will start at center. Okay. All right. So we should be all right. So Tate Rutledge is a rookie, is what you're saying. Because we got the running backs. Um, our offensive line, we had one of the best offensive line, but like you said, we're going to be kind of struggling with Ragnu out. Zadarius Smith, yeah, I thought we should have kept him, at least to come off the bench in case someone got injured. You know what I mean? Because I think he filled in pretty good for what he brought to the team last year. But maybe they will go out and re-sign him. If he hasn't already signed somewhere else. Because I liked his style of play. He was exciting. He kept the team out there hype, and he brought a lot of pressure. When he was out there. Decker out for the first four. Wow. Yeah. So that's one thing I'm definitely about to. I got to get caught up on our first round on our draft picks, I should say, start doing my studying on this year's roster, because this should be an exciting year. Who do we have the first game of the season? And that's big. Decker out the first four games. Wow, Pasco injured too, man. You know what? Yeah, we it's probably gonna start off shaky this season. Uh, especially with Pasco being out. I think that's what you spelled. I don't have my glasses, but it looked like you said Pasco was out too. Say, will the Lions be able to keep all the stars? I'm gonna say yes. I said they will be able to keep most of their key players, because I believe and I'll have to go and check and do my research on that, but I believe they were one of the teams that had a lot of money left over in a salary cap to be able to resign most of their key players. Yeah, but look, if you guys are not a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button. I have goals that we are definitely getting close to reaching over here. So I need for you guys to continue to hit that subscribe button. And I want to thank everybody who's hit that subscribe button thus far. You said no way. I mean, they got the money to resign mostly all their key players. I think, last time I checked, I thought we were like one of the second or third team that had a lot of money in our salary cap to be able to resign most of our key players. I could be wrong. I mean, so who do you think that we won't be able to resign? Shit, man, listen, we keeping both of them off top. We got to. J-Mo or Gibbs, listen, we would let what's his name go before we let both of those guys are getting signed for sure. We would let old boy go before we let our other receiver go before we let J-Mo go. And that's saying he's a key player because I don't think we would be able to be where we were if it wasn't for him, the other receiver I'm talking about. So excuse me for not knowing the names, but I've been sipping, so these names are not coming to me. But yeah, Jameer Gibbs, he's definitely going to be resigned. J-Mo, he's definitely going to be resigned. And I believe they already resigned J-Mo or Branch. You got to let Branch go. Even though Branch, and if the Branch definitely was a key player on our defense last year, so that's a hard decision. But I will go with J-Mo. My question is, do you think we'll be able to? I know we got a lot of key, and this is crazy. We got a lot of, from what you're saying, we have a lot of key injuries getting ready to start this season off. So I mean, it's gonna be hard to get back to where we was last year, bro. With these injuries. It's almost like we starting off where we finished last year. If these injuries that and I believe what you're saying, I know you definitely know your stats on the Lions. So I'll say we won't, if this is true what you're saying, as far as these injuries, we will not get back to where we were last year. And then signing all these players, do you mean this year? Because who's holding out? Yeah, well, look, I'm not gonna hold you guys. And listen, it's definitely been a good conversation. I just wanted to come in and chime in. He said, "Bro, you tripping on what? Tell me what I'm tripping about on that one, Vito. Before I sign out, on what? You gotta tell me what I'm wrong on, so I can know. What, far as the salary cap? I could be wrong on the salary cap, but if I'm not mistaken, the Lions had the second or third were up under the salary cap, so they had a lot of money to resign most of their key players. Now I could be wrong. I mean, so you would get rid of JMO over Branch. Is that what you telling me? I agree with you that they will make another playoff push, but if what you're saying, and I know what you're saying is true, with all these injuries, Pasco is out, Decker out for the first 4 games. Um, our offensive line, I mean, I don't know. You tell me. With all these key injuries that you put up, how can we possibly, without a lot of these, yeah, tell me how can we possibly get to where we were last year with all these key injuries? And then, I don't know if these signings that you're talking about is for next year. Yeah, it's definitely going to skyrocket. I agree. So you must be talking about for next year, or if they have not signed him yet. Okay, I agree with you. Yeah, but hopefully these injuries, hopefully they'll be able to come back sooner than what is projected. If not, it just should be next man up. You know what I mean? Like how it was last year. We did a pretty decent job for all the key injuries that we had last year. Players stepped up, and they filled a lot of roles that that was hard to do. You know what I mean? And we did our thing, but at the end of the day, it was just too many injuries, for us to be able to sustain and beat these teams that we faced last year. Yeah, bro. What you mean? I'm reading your comments as you put them in. Yeah, well, look, bro. I just want to come in and talk it up for a second. No more next man up. I mean, that's how it is, bro. Next man up. If look, that's how it was when Hutchinson went out. It was next man up. And I mean, injuries is a part of the game, Vito, and it's always going to be next man up. In situations like that. You know that. You an ex baller. But I agree with you. Hopefully, it won't be no next man up. Hopefully, everybody will be healthy and ready to go. And we've gotten over this injury bug. Because last year that injury bug, it killed us. It cost us a season. So I want to agree with you. No more next man up. Hopefully, everybody will stay healthy. And do what they need to do to be out there on that field. But that's a good thing that Hutchinson is ready to go. Look, I'm not going to hold you guys up longer. I just want to come in and check in and talk about the conversation at hand. Do you think that you were your significant other's first choice, or did he just settle for you? So like I said, I need for you guys to make sure that you like, comment, subscribe to the show. If you're not a subscriber, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And it's your boy Damn D. I am out. Peace.